I don't really have any opening statement other than this is I thought we had an absolutely great year. It was a tremendous story that was developing, and with a lot of stories, the endings aren't very good, But I thought we had a year that we could really be proud of. And doing what we did throughout the course of the season, overcoming a lot of adversity and getting to the last 16 seconds of the seventh game of the Eastern Conference Finals is quite a feat. So I was proud of the team, proud of the coaches. I thought they did an incredible job, and sorry that it ended the way that it did.
You guys have had obviously a lot of great teams during your time here, so you've been faced with this decision many times. Just when you're trying to decide of whether to run it back or if a team needs changes to kind of invigorate the roster, what type of factors go into that type of decision?
I run it back with my wife every week, so and we always come to good terms, and even if we ran it back, we would have a very good team. But you have to be, I think, very proactive in looking at how you're going, to improve. And this is a great story that started in 2019. So in 27 years, if we've had, a start to a number of great stories, this is one of them when we signed Jimmy Butler, and then started to build the team from there. Drafting Justice Winslow and Josh Richardson, and then getting Bam, and then Ian Tyler and KZ and Precious, and Duncan and some of the other young guys that we talk about all the time, is that you're caught in betwixt and in between right now with these young players that are rising. Think about Tatum and Brown, where they were 3 or 4 years ago in their playoff runs, and so once your younger players can elevate to a point that that you can win with them, and along with Jimmy and the other veteran guys, then you can always think about running it back and be successful. But is that going to be what's going to lead to a championship? And that's all you think about. So I don't know what anybody has written or read. It's going to be read. I haven't read anything or listened to anything, but I don't know what you've written, and I don't know what you've said. So I don't know what's been said from last Sunday because I took a break, an absolute break, and from what I felt would probably be an assault. It's just the way it is. But I did get my granddaughter, Olivia, to clap at 9 months. Let's go Heat, let's go Heat, let's go Heat. I got her to do this on FaceTime. Let's go Heat. That was quite an accomplishment of coaching.
Pat, I guess in simpler terms, do you think this current core can win a championship as is, or does it need another star, second-level scorer, whatever it may be, to get over that hump?
I think we all realize that you can always use more, especially when you've gone through a season and then you've gotten the result. Then you begin to really analyze the result and why it wasn't as good as maybe you thought it should be. And so we're always going to try to improve the team, and I think that's what it's about. It's about continually growing and taking your hits, dealing with them, going home, and taking your wins and enjoying those and going home. But it's 106 games that we played, and we did a lot of great things. So I don't want to take away from anything that this team has done in these individuals. As to your question, do we need another? If there's one out there, throw them to me. But you can always use more, but it's got to be a good fit, but not at the cost of of doing something that could be sort of prohibitive. So we will look, we will explore. We always do this. You know, it's part of the business that we chose, and whatever the result brings after that season, then you might say we might need another this or another that based on how the league is playing, other teams are playing and matching up with certain teams and stuff like that. So that goes into the equation, yeah. We'll talk about it.
Pat, keeping in mind that you're in a win now mode, as you almost always are, and the fact that you've been able to get talent after the draft, does that make you more inclined to use these suddenly available draft picks this year and next as trade chips rather than investing in another late first-round player?
Well, where we're drafting is, you know, is late at 27. So, you know, there's a lot of good players that have been drafted, you know, down there. And, but it's sort of a crapshoot, you know, when you're looking for talent, and it isn't ready-made at the top of the lottery. And sometimes at the top of the lottery, it's not, you know, you can make a mistake there too. You know, as far as our draft choices, they're valuable to us. We finally got them back in order a little bit, and so we're going to use them. But unless something presents itself, you know, that causes you to say, hey, I think I'll do this, that would transcend drafting somebody, then I would always consider that. But that's all part of the discussion between now and the draft.
Considering some of the injuries that took place late in the season, do you feel like there's a concern about building an older roster, and do you see it as a necessary thing to upgrade and become younger at the same time?
Well, we're young. We got a lot of good young pieces, and those young pieces got hurt too. You know, I don't want to really talk about, you know, injuries, but, you know, the kind of soft tissue injuries that are happening on a regular basis in the NBA, it's almost like it's chronic. And the catastrophic injuries aren't as much, but guys are missing time for, you know, so these soft tissue injuries, and I can call them soft tissue injuries because, you know, whether it's a hamstring or a groin or a calf or something, you know, guys are sitting out missing time. So it was untimely for us to have some of those at a time when you wanted everybody healthy. So as far as the age of the roster, I think our roster is, you know, pretty almost perfect from a real veteran age standpoint where players can play and contribute. And we got the middle group of guys that are starting to rise up, and then we got some real young guys. And even though we don't have that many real young guys, I just saw some young guys. I saw 6 of them upstairs, really young. But you have to be a little bit concerned about the injuries. And so, you know, when you have injuries that derail your opportunity, we had that in the bubble. It was a direct hit to Bam. That wasn't an injury of attrition. It was a direct hit to his arm and his shoulder, and then Goran, you know, got hurt, and so that hurt us. And these injuries, these soft tissue injuries in the playoffs definitely hurt us too. But we still had a chance, you know. I mean, you just sort of rise above it. And I think that's one of the great stories, you know, this year is that we did find out a lot about other players when they were put in a position of having to play 25 to 30, 35 minutes. And it opens up your eyes to what the possibilities could be for them a year or two from now. And so there's this blend of when does it become perfect? And you never know it's ever going to become perfect until you win a championship. And then you'll say, you know, that worked out at that time perfectly. And we dodged a lot of bullets along the way, and you can win a championship. So I've been through this a number of times, and I like the team that we have, and I like the core. And so let's see where we can go internally, and let's see where we can go if something presents itself, if that's a viable option. But I'm not really concerned about the age I'm not, because there's more geezers in this league, playing at the top of their game, and so you can't really depend on them. That's why you got your other guys. I mean, you can depend on them, but not the way they were, back at 25 years old. But they can still, they can still do a lot for you.
Pat, obviously, Tyler had a fantastic season, winning Sixth Man of the Year. Curious what you thought of his postseason before the injury, and he said last week that he does want to start next season. What does he have to do to kind of solidify that for the next part of his career?
Well, I think his numbers speak for, him and in his game. Averaging 20 a game, and really shooting the ball well, developing a game that at times during the regular season's unstoppable for him to try to find a shot. He can find and create his own shots in a lot of different situations. So I don't even think he's here yet, really here yet as a full-time, complete player. And I say that about a player that averaged 20 and shot 38% from three, can score in bunches, can score at the rim, can score on floaters, can score on pull-ups, can score on threes. He gets out on the break, and he's 22. He's 21, 22 years old. So, the next step for him, and I think we're seeing this in the league, if you want to win a championship and you want to be a starter, you really have to become a two-way player today. And you have to improve in certain areas of your game. Now, we all know that at one time or another, teams will always put a target on Tyler's back or Duncan's back or Max's back or somebody else that they think they can beat one-on-one on a switch. And so I saw improvement in his defense this year. He's got great feet. He's got quick feet, and he just needs to get stronger again, and another 10 pounds of muscle mass, and he just needs to get stronger from a leverage standpoint, because I think he still has a lot to the upside. But as far as being a starter, come to training camp and win it. Come to training camp and win it. Sometimes it's that easy, and sometimes, the fit, as Spo, talked about over the last 2 or 3 years, it was better for us coming in, balancing the energy of scoring, and having somebody that can really control the ball. So if he wants to be a starter, we'll see in October. That's something that you earn, and there's no doubt that he has the qualities to be that.
Pat, wanted to ask you about Vic and Duncan. With Vic, did he show you enough in the couple months to make you think we would like to continue on with him, or do you need to give that more thought? And with Duncan, how do you get him back to what he was a couple years ago? You, the whole organization, coaching staff, and Duncan.
Well, Duncan, it's the first playoff game this year. He got 27 points. He had 8 threes, and he's a specialist, and you can't win in this league without having them. You got to have some specialists, guys who can rebound, block shots, some guys that can make threes, at the rate that he can make them. But I saw improvement in his game now where he's going downhill. He's got to turn the corner on handoffs and on pick and rolls and things of that nature, because he's being forced off the line. And so now the next part of his development is going to the basket and finishing and making plays and being very aggressive that way. And we saw that this year. And it isn't just off of random offside, ball cuts or basket cuts where he scores too. So, again, defensively, as a young player, even though he's not as young as some of the other guys, he's got to get better. And look, we hang our hat on that. I'm not going to say that, we lost a game because we had some horrendous three-point shooting games or somebody missed a three or whatever it is. If you don't guard all 3 areas of the court, if you don't guard the three-point line, if you don't guard two-point shots, if you don't guard at the elbow, if you don't guard at the rim, if you don't guard in transition, if you don't defend by rebounding, by taking charges, by getting loose balls and winning that war every night, then you're always going to blame it on shooting or something. And so To me, yes, Duncan can improve. That message has been delivered to him many times. But that's where we as a team have to win. And we have to win defensively as well as what we can do from an offensive standpoint. So we have shown that this year that at times when we didn't shoot the ball well, that our defense carried us. And we have a good defensive team. And I'm not going to say that, because we had some bad three-point shooting games, that was the reason, that we didn't, get to the finals.
And Vic, do you want Vic back?
Vic's story is off the charts, so I know you can write about it, and I'm sorry that you asked me a two-part question because I got so carried away on Duncan, But it was a great story, and watching him work, watching him come back, and then watching him get into games, and it wasn't easy at the beginning. When he had 21 in Toronto and then 40 in Orlando, and you started to see some things that he could do again that you saw in the past. And then in the playoffs, I thought he had some great moments for us. And he was the kind of player that I felt as, the series began to grow. I mean, all of them began to grow and became more competitive defensively, that you do need players that can break down a defense on their own, or with their quickness and slashing, can create their own shots. And so we'll see where that goes, because Vic's obviously he's a free agent, and we have his bird rights, and we'll definitely be talking to his agent.
Pat, PJ can also become a free agent if he obviously opts out. If he does opt out and become free agent, how much of a priority will it be to bring him back, just based on his importance to the team this past season?
Well, PJ is like a cornerstone. He was like, when UD was in his prime, even though UD wasn't, a primary scorer, he did things throughout the course of a game that were significant. I can remember going back to 2006, we all remember, that kind of player who wasn't Shaq or wasn't Zoe or he wasn't Dwayne or whoever, made the biggest plays in the fourth quarter for us offensively to win that championship. And so that's what Tuck does. Tuck is the kind of player that doesn't have to do a lot, from a scoring standpoint, but he makes so many great plays for you. And he is like a cornerstone for us, toughness, rebounding, defense, no-nonsense guy. And so, I'd love to have Tuck back next year. He's part of our core, and we'll see what happens. There's not enough like him in the league. No, there are. There's a lot of guys like him in the league, but he's special.
Pat, you've always spoken to us, as a player gets older, his conditioning has to get even better to keep up with that. Kyle Lowry this season, when you look at him as a 36-year-old player going on 37, where he stands conditioning-wise, what he looked like at the end of the season, how much of a priority is that for you to do what you've done with a bunch of your older players and maybe be a little bit more demanding as a player ages into that?
Kyle had a challenging year for a lot of reasons, and I don't have to get into them. They're personal. They're other things, but he had a challenging year with the move and everything. Earlier in the season, he had some injuries, missed some time, and then there were some personal issues. But look, the bottom line with me and for me, as far as hoping that you can get the most out of a player, I don't have to go back and talk about it, is that you got to be in world-class shape. You just have to be. And that is something, as you get older, there's a point of diminishing returns as you get a little bit older, that when you're younger, you can do things in spite of that. But I'm not saying that when he was younger, he wasn't in the kind of condition that he was in this year, but he definitely is going to have to address that, and it will be addressed. And to get to what the perfect, overall conditioning for him to be successful, because he plays the game, you know, in a manner where he needs his strength and his size. You know, he's not, you know, he's not Tyler Herro. He's not that lean kind of guy, but I think he can be in better shape, and you know, and I do believe that the pain of losing and the reminders that you send out about this, you know, might change his mind a little bit. But I do think that that he can be in better shape next year, and you know, we'll address it and we'll try to help him as best as we can, because it's not easy when you get a little bit older. So. But contrary to what he says, I don't think it was a wasted year. You know, he said it was a wasted year. I mean, I've had that feeling myself as a coach, you know, when you've done as much as you can do, and then you just sort of like, you know, I mean, it was championship or bust for Kyle. He came here with that notion, and he's very, very disappointed in the fact that we couldn't get to the finals and win it. So he'll do whatever he has to do, I think, Ira.
We've sort of gone through this with you a few times, and you always defer. Eric's the coach. He makes the decisions. We've talked about going bigger, different approaches center. We had the Hassan and Bam combination. Eric worked that out. Bam Adebayo is in many ways not the typical prototypic center you work with over the years. The true big man, different hybrid. I understand that. Is there any thought from you about being able to, number one, play him with Omer Yurtseven and go big more often? And number two, how different is it for you to watch that kind of center leading one of your teams versus what you had in Kareem and Patrick and Zoe and Shaq and those kind of centers? Sort of your thoughts on today's centers, please.
So you just described my career, didn't you? Yeah. So Patrick, Kareem, okay, Shaq, okay. You know, they don't make them like that anymore, Ira. They really don't. They don't train them like that anymore. There are some. Obviously, Joel, you know, and Jokic, you know, these guys are prototype, you know, back to the basket centers, but also they can shoot threes, you know, from that standpoint. They're very versatile, their ball handling skills, all of those things. And we wouldn't think twice about, you know, trying to use players like Zoe, you know, in that context, you know, during that, you know, put his butt down underneath that basket. If he took a turnaround jumper, I would give him one of those a game as a throwaway. But, you know, Zoe was always 80% at the rim, and most of those other centers were the same way. Speaking particularly to Bam, you know, he's been asked to do a lot of things, you know, as a young player, and he has grown into being very efficient at doing these things. So, you know, it's almost that learning curve of being a facilitating big, either at the elbow, on handoffs, on pick and rolls, or whatever he's doing. He's always getting somebody open. Duncan should pay him half his check. Tyler should pay him half his check. Max should pay him half his check. I mean, you don't realize what he does to get people open. And a lot of that has to do with how other teams are playing him, because they're dropping way back and we can get that shot. But maybe we look for that a little bit too much. This could be a year, and Spo and I'll sit down and talk about it, about how can Bam be developed in a way to improve his consistent shot ability every night, getting 15 shots every night, and quality shots, you know, that he can get, that he can create, you know, whether it's in the post, whether it's the elbow or whatever. He can be very prolific at times, but it can't always just be on effort, on running, on offensive rebounds, on lob dunks, you know, on little floaters. I do think there's a part of him that can grow, and so that's dependent a little bit on your overall offensive philosophy and how much you want to change that. But I think you're right. I think there's another level at his age now that we need more consistency in his ability to get good shots, create good shots for himself and us, and score.
We always ask you, usually the last question, but I don't know how long we're going. 27
I've
years?
got the whole day.
All right.
No, I really don't, but I have the whole day.
27 years in, lots accomplished. You know, there's always a thought that Pat would always go out with a bang, and you made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and within one game of going to the NBA Finals. Where do you sort of stand as far as, one, this might sound too cold, I apologize. Do you see a finish line of this job? And number two, is this something where that's so far in the distance that you're already planning 1, 3, 5 years out because of who you are?
Well, I definitely feel an obligation to finish this build. And so if we're 3 years into this build, then, I don't want to do another 3 years of just building this team. I mean, I think we're in that window of internal improvement. We got a great player in Jimmy Butler. We know that. We have a lot of real experienced veterans. And so we put together a team that got to the Eastern Conference Finals, and it was bitter. It was a bitter loss. I mean, the dragon hasn't, actually left my body yet from that loss. It was, I was stunned. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was all of those things, for the last week. And now I'm beginning to move on past all of that. And so I haven't given that any thought at all, Ira, And so until somebody brings it to me, other than the media, I'm 77 years old. And right now I can do more push-ups than you can do right now. If you want to go to the mat, let's go.
Shirts off, Riley.
Can you see that?
No one needs to see that.
But yeah, I haven't thought much about that. I just, this was a great year for us. I was happy with this year. I watched the young players playing. I sit in that box with Zoe, and Andy's in front of me with Adam, and we don't talk a lot. We just sort of stare at the game and watch it, write down notes and everything. And there are nights that I am so excited about watching this game and the evolution of the game and the players. It's so different than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago when I coached in LA. It's a different game, a different time, and we have to stay one step ahead of the posse in order to stay one step away from, what it's called, the street, so, and that's what we're going to continue to try to do.
Udonis had mentioned he was non-committal about returning back to the court as a player, but he said no matter what, he still wants a role with this organization. Just your thoughts on him coming back, how important he is to the team in the locker room, and what kind of role do you foresee him having with this organization moving forward in his future?
When you got 20 years of experience like he does, and he's knowledgeable, and he has the right disposition, for this organization, we want him to be in this organization as long as he wants to be. I mean, defining exactly what it is that he wants to do. I mean, I would love to have UD around, in whatever capacity. And so we haven't discussed any of that because I still think he's struggling with, I want to be on the court. That's the biggest thing that I miss about coaching. Or when I was a sometime player back a long time ago, is that when you're in the game, then all your anxiety and all your stress, and adrenaline is in that game. And when I sit there and look at it, I don't have any way to release what I know was a great feeling when I coached. That adrenaline and that anxiety and that stress is all right out there in competition. And so he'll have a hard time, with that, because you miss that as much as the camaraderie and all of the other things. And so I'll sit down with UD. I love him to death. I don't even know if people remember how it all started with UD and me. And we were in Puerto Rico and playing a preseason game back in his rookie year, 2003. And I had not, decided on a starting lineup yet. We had Lamar Odom, we had Brian Grant, we had Eddie Jones, we had Cron, we had Dwayne we just drafted, and we got this kid, we got this man, UD is sort of a rookie we just signed. And went through training camp, and everybody assumed that it was going to be Lamar Odom as the starting power forward. And when we got down to Puerto Rico for our walkthrough, I named him as the power forward. and not one person, like rolled their eyes and said, well, Lamar should be in there or whatever. And ever since that day, that's what UD is. He's a starter. He is a guy who grinds. He's got more talent than he ever has been given credit for, because he simply decided and played the role that team needed, to win. And that was one of my favorite teams of all time. I was talking about Karan the other day, and I apologized to him, now 20 years later. I said, I'm sorry I traded you. And I said, but I always would wonder how Eddie and Dwayne and you and Lamar and Udonis and Brian Grant, I always wonder how that team would have been if it stayed together for 2 or 3 years. And it didn't. But we ended up winning the championship. I don't know if that was the cost of maybe having something that could have been a longer run, but UD was a part of it, a big part of that team. And he had a big part of this organization, for a long time. And so we'll see where that goes. Yeah.
I ask you this knowing that you had a very good season, knowing you were one of the final 3 teams standing, and knowing that Boston had an excellent defense. That said, were there ever any times in that series or during the playoffs, Pat, where you said to yourself, we need to get Jimmy another big-time scorer to play with him to make things easier for our half-court offense and for Jimmy?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a valid question, and I think it's almost maybe a consensus around the league, by people who know what they're talking about, who study the league and know what it takes to really be successful, from that standpoint. So, as I said earlier about that, Jimmy, has a very unique game. Not having Tyler, just having Tyler at his best, which could always, they could work off of one another, and they can play together. But, and that's where, going back to Ira's question about Bam, maybe this is where internally now it's time to go in that direction with more responsibility. Now, if there's something from outside that avails itself that doesn't cost us an arm and a leg that could fit that bill, then I'd always be interested in looking at that. But I think we have what we need internally, but we'll see, from that standpoint. If you have a perfect, replacement or a perfect player, then why don't you text me? You don't even have my number, do you? My number? No.
Pat, as you step into Summer League, and that's only a couple of weeks away, can you speak to the luxury of having a staff like Adam Simon and Eric Glass, and you talk about the luxury of having these younger, up-and-coming kids that really have embraced that two-way, Gabe and Max Strus, and those were all part of the, the G League development team. Can you first speak to, since everyone's asking two-part questions, first speak to the great staff that you have and your G League developmental team and what you're looking forward to in this upcoming couple of weeks in Las Vegas?
Well, we're still rebounding from this, as a staff too. Some of them look like the Walking Dead. I don't know which one I could call Rick, but it's only been a week for those that haven't watched The Walking Dead. I haven't either, but Rick is cool. But my point is that they were here today, okay, and they're working out 6 young guys up there, and basically draft prospects, and they worked them out with the enthusiasm like nothing happened, and I know they're still feeling it. So we got a great staff of coaches and trainers, more than enough, that do their own job, and then they do each other's job, and they cover for one another. When somebody takes a vacation, they make sure somebody else is here to take care of this player or that player. And Spo has really built, I think, over the last 4 or 5 years, a staff that he's really comfortable with, and there were some other additions, downstairs that makes it a little bit more seamless. So our staff's incredible, I think, from a coaching standpoint, training standpoint, and then as far as the Summer League coming, that's they'll get back into it, and we'll be in, you know, in Vegas before you know it, and there'll be a number of players that we will see that will come through there. We'll have Kasib from Sioux Falls out there. You know, we'll have the trainers coming out, and we try to marry that as much as we can. It hasn't been as easy the last couple of years because of the pandemic and everything sort of being sideways. So the G League has not taken a hit, but I think this year we're going to be investing a lot more time and attention into that. But a lot of the players came from there, not just on our team. Okay, everybody talks about the guys that were two-way players that came here that have made it or are on their way to making it. And then you go around the league and take a look at all the other teams. There's, you know, 3 or 4 players on every team, either young or players that are in the rotation that came from the G League. Yeah, weren't drafted. Yeah. Second question.
The second question was, just speak to some of the younger core kids and especially Gabe Vincent feeling like he said, I think I've earned my role to be a rotational player in this league. Just speak to the progress of some of these up and coming names and, you know, the progress of Max Strus stepping into a role 3 years into the league and just his confidence level and, you know, what they've given back to the core squad.
Right. It changes with young players who all of a sudden they hit it. They think they hit it. And so the work ethic from, you know, Gabe, Caleb, you know, Max, you know, all of our young guys, you know, that basically have played and sort of helped us. I'm not talking about Bam or Tyler or Duncan. They've been around for a while. They seem like veterans. But they still have to come to training camp. And if he feels that way and his time on the court, you know, whether it's rotational player, spot player, or a starter, has to equate to winning. So it's always about winning. I mean, you can play young players till you're blue in the face, but do you want to play them, you know, at the expense in the medieval late quarters of a playoff game, and they haven't been there before. So I think Gabe's one of those guys. I think he has that in him. He has something about him as a competitor, and does Max, that I think eventually they can get there. And so, you know, Max found out that, you know, I'm not a 40% shooter against the Celtics, you know, or against Philadelphia, because they're not going to give you that look. But he has a very unique game and a very unique shot that, and I think Spo spoke to this, and we talk a lot about the stress now that defenses are putting on three-point shooters and how they're running you down and staying with you on the line, making you go back door and making you work harder. So you have to develop yourself as a complete player. You got to be able to go downhill. Max has to be able to go downhill and finish now. He can't be going downhill and putting up layups and missing, you know, and he's got to be able to go downhill and, you know, make a little pull-up jumper, and he's got to make layups. And so his game, you know, has to change a little bit, and he knows this, and he'll develop this. But I think they have the ability to do this. And watching Tyler in his rookie season, and then watch him now. I mean, when he goes to the basket, you know, he's got these runners and he's got, you know, one-handed shots off the board. So you have to create more offensive opportunities than just be a sticker.
I know this was 2.5 months ago, but we haven't talked to you since this. But what did you make of the sideline confrontation with, you know, Spo, Jimmy, UD, and does Jimmy's, I guess, competitiveness, his intensity remind you of anybody you've coached?
Oh, look. Yeah, me. I think my favorite comment from a player all year was, I don't know, something happened. There was an altercation with Jimmy and some other player on another team. And he just threw up his arms and he said, "Oh, let's just go brawl." You know, let's go to the back parking lot and brawl. But, you know, getting back to that one incident, it happened, and it was handled quickly, and they got beyond it. And that's this league. There's a lot of passion in this league when it comes to winning, and I think a lot of the players today, they have a lot more input, and he's smart as hell. He's got a tremendous basketball IQ about how the game should be played, how you respond to people, how you talk to each other. I think there's a great respect on our team for each other, but we got some real, as Bam calls them, dogs in that locker room, and when things don't go well, they get to snapping at one another, and so. It can't be a regular occurrence, but that happened to happen in public. It's happened to me before, and and I got into an argument one time on the bench with a player that he wanted me to go to the locker room. And I was trying to throw him out. He was, no, you go to the locker room, and then, no, you got to go to the locker room. And I said, no. I said, I get to throw you out of the game to the locker room. He said, no, I'm not going. I said, so what am I going to do? I have to wait till after the game. So I'm not poo-pooing that. I didn't like it. They didn't like it. Spo didn't like it. I don't think anybody liked it. But you take a look at what's going on in the championship series right now. I mean, these teams want to win so bad that, I think the sparks have just begun to fly. But there will be a winner, and it won't be the one that yells the most or fights the most. It's going to be the best team. Yeah.
Coach, good to see you, Pat.
Eric, how you doing?
Doing well. First thing, I'm glad to hear that you're a Walking Dead viewer. That's good to know.
No, it's Karen, my administrative assistant. 27 years Karen has been here, and she would come in every day and tell me what happened the night before, and I said, Karen, Walking what? Walking Dead. So I watched a couple of them one night, but anyhow, now I know what you do on your off hours.
I credit my wife to that, too. Just talked about Summer League. That's where we first saw Omer Yurtseven last year, and then that run he had during the middle of this year. I'm just curious to what you saw of him, where you think he's at, and where you think he might be able to get to.
Well, he did show, a double game for, I think, 14 games or as many games as Bam missed. I mean, he was prolific as a rebounder and also as a scorer and finished well. He definitely needs to improve in certain areas of strength, mobility, footwork, back to the basket, strength, that kind of stuff. Also defensively, that will all come with him. I avoided the question with Ira about whether or not Omer and Bam, can play together. Probably they could. And it depends on who the other three guys are around, and so. That's a decision that Eric will make based on what kind of a fit is it. It isn't something you just put together, but you hate to experiment during the course of the season in a way that it's going to cost you wins. So Dwayne Dedman had a great year, and that was a good combination. Will Spo go a little bit bigger with the thought that, well, I need to have a stretch three, or a stretch, 5 that can make threes, and Bam. That's something that I think he'll work out, but I think it's something that you make a good point about, that sometimes we might have to play big, but you got to make sure that you get the right fit on the two bigs.
One last thing, your thoughts on Mike Fratello getting the Chuck Daly Award this weekend?
I did get I didn't see it, but I got from Ronnie Rothstein, and Tony Ferrantino sent me the article, and I haven't gotten back to Mike yet, but I will send him, one of my surly texts to Mike, and he deserves it. I can remember Mike and I back in the 80s. He was coaching Atlanta, and he had this curly hair. You see him on the sidelines, I asked him one time, I said, Mike, are you actually doing it? Or is it just natural, and then he saw me 2 weeks later, and I had curls in the back of my hair, and we go back a long way with stories like that, but he was one of the great coaches, defensive coaches, and clinicians and teachers, and You know, I can remember sitting with him and Ronnie, you know, in LA one time, just at a dinner, just talking basketball and hoops. And it's as if those guys that, you know, were raised up in that area of New Jersey, it's like they have this cult, and they all understand, you know, basketball and where everybody came from, and the players and coaches, and Mike was part of all of that. And I can remember talking to Mike about, you know, what do you have in your garage? Because all coaches just store all their notes and everything in their garage, and he would bring out books from Hubie and books from other coaches and stuff. But he's very deserving of it. I'm happy for him. I really am.
All right, thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Have a good summer.